Status of women. I recognize that some people are still taking their seats, but my opening remarks should give them enough time to be able to take a seat. I call this meeting to order. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Tuesday, February the 4th, the committee will resume its study of intimate partner and domestic violence in Canada. Compte tenu de la situation
Given the current pandemic situation and in the light of the recommendations of health authorities as well as the October 19th, 2021 directive, in order to maintain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person must be symptom-free, must maintain a physical distance of 2 meters, must wear a non-medical mask while circulating in the room, and it is strongly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including while seated in one's seat. And they must practice good hand hygiene using the hand sanitizer provided at the entrance to the room.
Participating virtually, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. You may speak in the official language of your choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor or English or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you're on the video conference, please check on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your mute will be controlled as by normal by the proceedings and verification officer. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. Before we welcome our witnesses, I would like to remind everyone with this trigger warning. We will be discussing experiences related to violence and assault. This may be triggering to viewers with similar experiences. If you feel distressed or if you need help, please advise the clerk. And thank you very much. Just to let you know, because we are starting a few minutes late, we will be proceeding longer because we do want to make sure that we get as much time with the witnesses as possible. So we will be going longer and past our time so that we can do this. So I will be messing around a little bit today, so we'll just stay on top. So I would like to introduce you as our first panel for today. For our first panel, we have from the Battered Women's Support Services, Angela Marie McDougall, who is the Executive Director. From Possibility Seeds, Farah Khan, who is the Executive Director. And from the South Asian Women's Centre, Kripra Sakar, the Executive Director. I will be providing you each 5 minutes to give your opening comments. In the last minute, I will be putting up a little sign that says 1 minute, so that's your 1 minute left. So we're going to pass the floor over now to Angela for 5 minutes. Angela, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the committee for this opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Angela Marie McDougall, and I'm the Executive Director of Battered Women's Support Services, also known as BWSS, and I am so honored to be here on behalf of our wonderful team of volunteers, staff, leadership, board of directors, and most definitely the 18,000 victims and survivors that access our services annually. As an ending violence organization taking action through community-based interventions, as well as direct services for victims and survivors of a range of gender and relationship violence, including intimate partner violence and sexualized violence, our work extends into education, training, as well as a number of different activities that we do through education, prevention, and our efforts also involve legal advocacy, community legal education, law reform, wherever the law intersects with gender-based violence. And our research and policy work examines root causes, and we're always looking for solutions to address GBV, gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. And so as a regional organization based here in Metro Vancouver, British Columbia, also known as the traditional territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people, BWSS has had the opportunity to hear from our communities about the similarities and disparities in services and supports all across British Columbia and in Canada. So my remarks today are to add deeper dimensions of the impacts of intimate partner violence and gender-based violence. As our founding women recognized that intimate partner violence does not take place between two individuals, only take place between two individuals in isolation, but rather in a social context and a worldview that systemically reinforces the power of some people to oppress others. So we echo the most excellent recommendations that have already been put forward to the committee in previous sessions. And we want to underline and emphasize that previous witnesses have recognized the need for a whole of government, cross-sectoral, cross-jurisdictional approach to addressing gender-based violence, and that this approach could be accomplished through a national action plan on violence against women and gender-based violence. As one of the over 40 organizations and advocates that contributed to the development of the roadmap for the National Action Plan, and as co-chair for the Supports for Survivors and Their Families pillar, I want to really emphasize the important work that I understand the committee has received from Women's Shelters Canada, that roadmap. And we want to urge the committee to promote timely action on resourcing the implementation of the National Action Plan and the over 100 recommendations that have already been set out in the report. And as an important framework that gives us an opportunity to really tackle the root causes of gender-based violence, and to lessen the systemic inequities that allow gender-based violence to continue unabated, I want to emphasize today some cross-cutting recommendations and areas of which I think we should be particularly focused on working on. As you probably know, I believe that today is the day after March 21st, and that day is the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And at BWSS, we serve all survivors, including trans and cis survivors. However, today I wish to make visible the experiences of Indigenous, Black, newcomer, immigrant, refugee, and racialized survivors so that we understand and that we are thinking about the ways in which anti-violence service provision, advocacy, government policy can center the very unique realities for survivors. Every day during the pandemic, we have been witness to the escalating racism that Indigenous, Black, Asian, Muslim, and other racialized communities, especially racialized women and gender diverse people, have experienced. And we ask the committee to better understand and raise awareness on the experiences of Indigenous, Black, newcomer, immigrant, refugee, and racialized survivors in order to access formal and institutional responses to gender-based violence. What you might not know is that as an organization that's been delivering services for the last 40 years, we have been very careful to focus on specialized supports. And what that's meant is we've heard from survivors that they understand most profoundly that for us, that it's so important to understand that racism exists and survivors experience it. And so what I like to urge the committee is that through your investigation, through your recommendations, through the actions that come out of this work, that we are responding to gender-based violence through working to end racism. We know it's challenging, but it is necessary. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Ms. McDougall. I'm now going to pass the floor over to Ms. Khan. Ms. Khan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, and at 1 minute, I'll start giving you the wave. Okay?
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. Okay. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this conversation is taking place across traditional territories of many Indigenous nations. I'm currently on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and now home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. My name is Farah Khan. I've spent 25 years raising awareness about the intersections of gender-based violence and equity through education, policy, art creation, and advocacy. I'm currently the executive director of Courage to Act, a national project to address and prevent gender-based violence at post-secondary schools through my company, Possibility Seeds. I also run a sexual assault and gender-based violence center at Ryerson University. I'm really grateful to speak to this esteemed committee because gender-based violence, specifically domestic violence, intimate partner violence, has been on my mind as I've witnessed time and time again survivors struggling under the pandemic. This is the second pandemic that we're living in. What we know is that domestic violence and intimate partner violence is rooted in gender inequality, power, and privilege. It's a manifestation of patriarchal violence that intensely impacts the communities we live in. One thing that isn't talked about enough is the fact that it actually affects young people in disproportionate ways than any other age cohort. What we know is that 3 in 10, 29% of women between the ages of 15 to 24 years of age have reported being subjected to intimate partner violence in the past 12 months. The rates are even higher for people within that age group that are part of Black, Indigenous, racialized communities, women with disabilities, 2S LGBTQ people. When we think about who is a domestic violence or intimate partner violence survivor, we oftentimes do not think of that 15 to 24 years old age group, but we're missing out when we don't. It's really important to note, too, that these conversations aren't binary, that trans and gender non-binary people face a high rate of IPV and physical, sexual, and psychological harm at 1.7 times higher than the cisgendered people. I, too, agree with Angela, my colleague, that says, we need the national action plan to happen. We need it well-resourced, and we need to move quickly because this is a pandemic in of itself. We need to act on the recommendations of the National Inquiry of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. We need to center the voices of survivors and the work of grassroots movements and remember that we leave no one behind. Because oftentimes when we think about who is a survivor, we focus on the needs of white, cis women. And we know that that's not true because across the country, so many women, girls, and men and boys are experiencing this type of violence. Trans and gender non-binary people, Two-Spirit folks, we can't leave anyone behind because no one deserves this. We have to challenge and narrow definitions of what is domestic violence to ensure that no survivor that is experiencing things like forced marriage, stalking, harassment online, intimate images being shared are shut out of accessing services and feel like they cannot reach out for support. We need desegregated data that talks about race, gender, sexuality, so we understand the scope and ways in which this impacts diverse communities. I don't know about you, but I want action about housing. We have a huge affordable housing issue in Canada where it breaks my heart when a survivor says, I cannot leave this violence. I have to live in it because there's nowhere for me to go. We also have to address food insecurity when we know that disproportionately affects women and that right now we are in a food crisis and people, again, will stay with an abuser because they can't afford to leave. We also have to look at income security supports and social protection so that no one feels, again, that they have to think about if I have to pay my rent, pay my bills, there's no way I can leave this abusive situation. We keep women and girls and people inside abusive relationships by not addressing income security. We have to continue the affordable health childcare because people are able to actually afford to pay for their children now to be in childcare so that they can get out of abusive relationships and stay out. We need to provide grants, not loans, to post-secondary students to ensure that they are able to actually go to school and not feel like they rely on abusive family members, community members, their partners to address the needs they have for education. I would also say implement Kira's law. That child should never have been killed, but a private member's bill that would expand judicial education to include seminars on intimate partner violence and coercive control needs to go forward. I say too, this last piece is that we need to address the criminalization of intimate partner violence survivors. Just past month, Tanner Brass was found dead hours after police arrested his mother, Kyla Frenchman, when she argued with them about her son's safety. The boy's father, Kaija Brass, was charged with second-degree murder. The police could have prevented this, but instead they criminalized an Indigenous mother, and her son was killed as a result. We need to do better. We need to stop criminalizing survivors, especially Black and Indigenous survivors. We need also the government to invest in non-punitive approaches and divest from carceral approaches to addressing domestic violence. We can no longer look at the approaches that we have been doing because they're not working. We need to change it. And lastly, we need you to invest in young people because young people experience high rates of violence and they're not protected right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Just in between, I'm just going to ask, we just got a little note here. So for Ms. McDougall, there's a bit of an issue with your blurred background. I guess it's causing a bit of a connectivity issue. So while Ms. Sakara is going to speak, perhaps you can work on that. And so during this time, I'd now like to switch the floor over to the South Asian Women's Centre. And Kripa, the floor is yours. You will have to take off your mute. Your mute button is still on. It should be there on the screen. So if you go onto your screen, you'll see it usually in the bottom left-hand corner where the video is also showing your option for video and your audio. Do you see it there? If not,
okay, it's unmute.
You're perfect. Perfect.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak. I appreciate the time that you have given me. Thank you so much to each and every one of you from the Standing Committee to listen and hear the voices of South Asian women that I'm trying to represent through the many years of work. This is 40 years of service within the South Asian community, and I'm not going to repeat a lot of what has already been said because so much has been statistically informed, and I do not wish to further waste my time on that, but rather I'll focus on what we have found in terms of South Asian Women's Center. So we were founded in 1982, and we have served over 900 women in abusive situations in the past 3 years. When I say abusive situations, I mean they have come, they have reported. Many of them don't even get out of that situation. When we talk about intimate family violence or intimate partner violence, we understand that within the South Asian community, it reflects the issue between two spouses. And very often, women in the South Asian community will say, but that's what I was destined for. So there's almost a fatalistic unwillingness to accept this issue and to even file a complaint about it. But I will go on to actually talk about, I've presented my paper, so I'm going to focus more on the impact of the pandemic and what we saw coming out of this pandemic. SOC would like to focus on the condition of South Asian women during the COVID-19 pandemic. The issue of recovery, we feel, cannot be trivialized, as it will take years for women to get over the traumatic consequences of heightened abuse because of isolation, because of so many other factors, and it's across all ages. The barriers that South Asian women across all ages and genders face include racism, language, death, grief, access to housing, health, transportation, income security, childcare, immigration status, etc. We have always talked about this, but COVID-19 has magnified these issues. This is apparent based on the numbers of women seeking help during this time. Our offices were open all through COVID because women from the South Asian community have very unique needs. Many of them do not have access to computers. They do not know how to read and write English. And therefore, we needed to make sure that there was an ability to communicate with them. And that's why we stayed open and we took care of all the public healthcare needs, including hosting vaccination clinics. So between April 2020 to December 2021, SOC 7 counselors received over 4,000 calls. And approximately 900 of them were related to abuse. The focus of this brief is to look at the intersectionality between gender poverty, mental health trauma, and immigration status. SOC has been struggling with questions related to the following issues coming out of COVID. We know of at least 10 to 15 cases of women where spouses lost their employment and returned to the home country because they didn't know what else to do. Many of them were employed as taxi drivers, restaurant workers, or even small business owners. Most of them lost everything during COVID, and men decided to return to their home countries, essentially deserting their spouses and children. Many women are not fluent in English and never had a job. SOC spent hours filling out application forms to get women some financial help. SOC's food bank saw an increase to clients. But the South Asian community, as well as the Daily Bread Food Bank, helped us to fulfill many needs. Couple of men who went back home even remarried. completely abandoning the women to fend for themselves along with dependent children. There is an intergenerational impact to this. Most of the women do not know how to use a computer and have no access to one. So the issue of online schooling was really tough for them. Isolation did not allow for any kind of personal support system, and SOC received calls from the same women 4 to 5 times a day because of desperation. SOC also struggled with international students, but there are 2 main recommendations I want to make. Adequate and core funding to organizations that is more permanent and is not like a contract agreement but will be more core for several years so that we can actually look at the needs of BIPOC women who are able to live free from abuse, have stable financial security, and ensure proper housing, childcare, and employment. Senior BIPOC women have access to long-term care support, adequate income support, and housing support. And women who have been deserted by Canadian women in their home countries be granted some temporary permanent residency status to enable them to seek justice.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. We're now going to start over and start going on our rounds. I will be interjecting at your time because the time is so tight today. So I'm going to pass the floor over to Shelby. Shelby, you have the first round of questions for 6 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you. I think first I'd like to acknowledge my sincere thanks to all of you for taking the time to speak to all of us and enlighten us with your backgrounds and what you're doing to help. Perhaps I'll start the first question with for Farah from Possibility Seeds. I'm just curious, is there a way that you're able, or are you already promoting healthy relationships among young people? Because so much of this is rooted in how we begin.
I love that question. So what we know, which is devastating, is that 71% of university and college students have said that they have experienced or witnessed gender-based violence, specifically sexual violence and intimate partner violence, 71%. And so that says we're making a huge mistake when they're growing up in our in our high schools and our grade schools. What we know is that there's not comprehensive sexual health education, which includes relationship education. People get really stuck on the sex part of it and forget that most of it is about relationships, about consent, about body autonomy, about respecting your partner, caring for your partner. Just last past week, there was a TikTok trend that teenagers were making that brought about young men saying that ways that they would kill their partner on their dates. It was a trend that went across viral. It was depressing to watch and heartbreaking. And when we don't have comprehensive sexual health education that includes healthy relationships, which we don't, and actually stops after grade 9, and you have to opt into it usually, what the problem is that we actually create this ourselves. We create violence to continue when we don't have real education for children and youth.
Okay, thank you. So is there a way that our teenagers are being notified, or how are they aware? Like, is it on all the different social media trends, or is it just TikTok or Instagram or what have you? But is there an informative educational way to make sure that these young teenagers are aware of exactly what healthy relationship means, because it's interpreted very differently for different people?
Absolutely. Well, and we know that if we don't have that education, it continues the violence. And so we need to have comprehensive education in all grade schools from K to 12. And it shouldn't be a partisan issue. And oftentimes this conversation becomes partisan where certain parties and everybody is like, oh, we got to protect the kids. You're not protecting children by not getting them comprehensive education in the schools. And that's up to school boards, that's up to the provinces, but that's also up to the federal government about provincial transfers and saying, let's get that education in there. And it shouldn't be a if, it's a when, because this is how we prevent it, by having real education that's comprehensive and doesn't shy away from the conversation.
Okay, fantastic. My next question is for Angela, Angela Marie McDougall. So I'll start by suggesting that I really think it's important that in collaboration with Indigenous groups, we need an action plan that addresses the violence against Indigenous women and girls and all BIPOC. I think that we need to know, clearly this has been an issue before the pandemic and it's not new, but is there a new type of way to deliver the programs post-pandemic? Or how has the pandemic itself impacted that?
I think, thank you for the question. Excellent question. And I think what we have seen is an erosion of the status of women from an intersectional point of view during COVID-19. So we've seen an escalation in violence in a number of ways. And that is borne out in terms of the ongoing and persistent numbers of Indigenous women and girls who have gone missing, and also those who have been killed during the last 2 years. But as you mentioned, this is not a new problem. This is not something that hasn't already been identified quite comprehensively through the National Action Plan on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And what is wonderful about that plan, which as an organization that was a party withstanding during the inquiry process, and it is one of the most comprehensive documents that we have, I dare say, that looks at the root causes of violence across a number of different aspects and also solutions. And so I think that we have in front of us a platform, a remedy, a way to take action, and I think that there are some important tweaks that can be made. One of the things that's profoundly and deeply important right now, and it's something that we're working on here way out here in the West in British Columbia, is the by and for approach to service delivery, which is where we are resourcing, ensuring that there are the capacity and resources for Indigenous women-led organizations in order to develop and design and deliver services that make sense for the communities in all of the complexity. Because this is at the heart. If we think and we really understand that the making of Canada as a nation has baked in a very specific kind of subjugation that is unique and horrifying in terms of the way that it's been targeted against Indigenous women and girls. In order for us to remedy that, we must prioritize Indigenous women-led solutions all across these lands. And that includes, of course, Inuit and Métis. So First Nations, unreserved, but also in urban settings, because, as we know, it's a very complicated landscape in which the violence occurs.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut some people off today. So I will be interrupting, as I said. So I please don't take anything personally here. I'm doing my best on that. I'm now going to move it over to Sonia Sidhu. Sonia, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all the witnesses for being here with us. My first question is to Ms. Khan. Ms. Khan, you said that young people are not protected. And can you tell us what kind of some best practices for the educational and the preventive programs they can addressing the intimate partner or domestic violence?
Thank you for that question. Children are protected in multiple ways. So when we don't provide education around domestic violence and intimate partner violence from a young age, children that witness that harm don't know that they're not alone. They may internalize it and think it's my fault, it's something that just happens to my family. And instead, we need to open that door because there's a window there too, and make sure that they can hear that they're not alone. Best practices, again, are comprehensive conversations about it that don't shy away from talking about body parts, so that children that are sexually abused or experience family violence in the home know what body parts are being touched so that they can tell someone. I was one of those children, and I wish somebody had given me real education around it. Another thing that we really need to know for that best practices is that when teachers are educated about it too, when teachers know what to do with disclosures, not only to send them away because that's not what they need help there in the school. So what that looks like. We've seen protests across this country by students in the past 6 months that have said we're not getting the education we need about healthy relationships, fix it, from BC to PEI. So we need to listen to those children and youth and know that they need to be protected and cared for. And education that is comprehensive, not abstinence-based, is how to do it.
And to follow-up question, what age should young people start learning about the safe and healthy relationship? How should violence prevention initiative be adaptive? And you also said about surrogated data. So how we can collect that, and then which way?
I love all these questions. So the first one, we need to ensure that they're learning from the age of 0. You know, body autonomy is something. I have a 2-year-old and he knows body autonomy pretty quick. And I need to affirm his right to choose that his body is his body and that no one should touch him without consent. And that starts at a young age. That doesn't stop. You know, we can't stop children from learning because they're going to learn in other ways. So we need to give them comprehensive, good education on this. I think in terms of intimate partner violence is making sure too that they're learning about what relationships could look like, not only the relationships they see in their home that sometimes are abusive, are harmful, and not just, as Kripa said, we're talking about like intimate partner violence, but also about family members, siblings, how we treat each other with respect and care. So I think it can start at a very early age because violence starts at a very early age. So we don't give them an alternative, then all we're doing is saying, you know what, you're on your own. And I never want to say that to a child because children should be seen, heard, and believed. And when they don't have the right information, no one can hear them.
Thank you. And my next question is to Kripa Shikhar. We heard financial abuse, and you said that some women, they cannot use the computer, language barrier. I know there's many barriers. Can you speak to the challenges immigrant women may face when they are trying to leave an abusive relationship? What sort of tactics their abuser might use to prevent them from fleeing or seeking help? What can government can do to protect them?
Perfect.
Sorry, yeah,
It's all good.
Sorry. Okay, so I think Farah alluded to some of the issues, but I think what I want to say is, as an immigrant woman myself, as a racialized woman, South Asian, I don't know, in our home, this was something that wasn't even discussed. There was no talk about gender identity. You were just raised to listen, and you were not allowed to talk about these things. And I see that hasn't changed within immigrant families who immigrate to this country, regardless of where they come from within the South Asian context. It's still a very silent issue. And therefore, I remember, and very unfortunately, the time a few years ago when there was an educational piece that was introduced in the schools, there was a whole lot of protest and objection. And we ourselves had workshops for the women who come here to help them to understand that this was in fact good for their children, particularly good for young girls, because they had no idea, because we have seen ourselves, the level of incest within this community, particularly in the joint family structure. So while education will play a very big part, it is about access to this education and how best children will be able to get that sense of, where do I go? How do I understand this? Where do I need to find the resources? And parents limiting that access. There is still that issue. And I think we need to find other ways of reaching out to immigrant communities as well.
Thank you very much. Sorry. We do have to move over. We do have to move to the next person, and we'll be able to get that. Oh, it's all good. I'm sorry. I'm going to now move it over to Andriane Laroche. Andriane, you have 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to thank our 3 witnesses for their presentations today. They are very useful in examining violence against women and domestic violence. My first question is first for Ms. Khan, and if our other two witnesses have something to add, then they can. We know that the federal government put in place a strategy to counter gender-based violence in 2017. One of the goals of this strategy was to fill the gaps for different groups, for example, women, girls, Indigenous women, different gender identities. So with the implementation of this strategy, have things been solved? Are there still things that are lacking? Has the situation improved? Has the government's plan helped? And they have recently announced more years of studies, so what more can be done?
Question to me, because I couldn't get the interpretation.
I can do it in my answer back.
Was there was there no interpretation at all during that period of time?
There was.
No.
You just had to.
Yeah, I had to press this button, I know.
Okay.
So I wasn't able to.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's
but I'm
okay.
new to this.
No,
Okay.
that's okay. That's what we're talking about. Why we're all new to this, so I totally understand. Perhaps Farah can start off with and put that in there, and then we can move on. But I'll leave it up to Adrian. Go ahead, Farah, if you want to start and put that question.
Sure. And my name is Far, like far away, far out. No problem. So the question was, in 2017, the federal government put forth a gender-based violence action plan. Are things better? Are things getting better for the communities at large? I think that was kind of the short version of that. And I can say, as someone who's on the GBV advisory committee for the federal government, there are things that are much better under this government in terms of the fact that we are talking about it and it's open to the community. All of a sudden, violence against women organizations were welcomed onto Parliament to have conversations that were in depth about what we needed to do. And all of a sudden, there was funding for organizations to talk about this from a systemic issue and not just an issue that is something that happens between two people, as Angela has named. I think also what we're seeing is intersectional conversations come forward and funding that was put forward to the community to put together the national action plan, the community to say what we needed, the community to say this is what has to happen. I think for my program alone, in 2018, the federal government made a commitment to look at gender-based violence at post-secondary institutions. And we were part of that work that's being done. And it's been a game changer to actually be able to talk nationally about this issue, come together with violence against women organizations, survivors, student leaders, and say, what are we going to do to address this? But has it gotten better? No, because under the pandemic, it has been atrocious, the amount of violence we are all seeing. In Ontario alone, there was an 84% increase of femicides alone. So no, it's not getting better. It's actually devastating what's going on right now.
Okay.
Pour aider tout ça, dans les dernières semaines.
In the past weeks, many organizations have shared information at the committee, and they talked about the fact that there was a lack of foreseeable funding, and that was a very significant issue. They were asking for funding in the long term. What do you think about this? And having this foreseeability, how could it help organizations work on longer term projects?
Oui, c'est un complément de ma question, mais oui, allez-y.
Go ahead.
Who is that question to?
La question, donc évidemment, c'était pour donner.
My question was a follow-up to the funding question for Ms. Khan, but Ms. McDougall, if you want to answer, we can hear from you.
Thank you for that, and I'm grateful for the question. As Farah mentioned so well, that the work of this government has been a really important beginning and an advancement. And I'm also on the advisory committee and on GBV, the Federal Advisory Committee. And I think what we need is sustained action. The resourcing of women's and feminist organizations across the country has been important to make community-based response in a whole range of ways, but it has to be sustained. And lost ground under COVID. We've lost considerable ground under COVID. And so in order for us to continue the advancements that we think that we have made over the last 40 years around addressing inequities, we have to continue to really put our foot on the pedal to the metal in terms of funding and resourcing those community-based responses all across the country. And the National Action Plan is a roadmap for that. It does detail in great length considerable action that could be taken. So the question about investment, I think that's the next step, is to see that kind of investment escalate, not only to address what we think we had achieved as a result of the 2017 initiatives, but the fact that we've lost considerable ground over the last 2 years. So we have to at least get back to where we were and then to continue going. And that's going to take funding and resourcing in the way that the National Action Plan is detailed.
So I just want to say,
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to say and add to all of these solutions, I don't think there is a concrete one type of solution to fix all of the issues that have emerged post-COVID or during COVID. We know that women who we serve come from 2 countries, sometimes even 3. And therefore, when there was death and there was illness of a parent or a partner in another country, it was very difficult for families to meet. The grieving process, the fear of extreme isolation as a result of that, and the abuse that women have gone through during this time has been phenomenal. I wanted to give you a few examples, but I don't think we have the time.
What I'll do is we will ask for anything after. That's absolutely fine. We're going to now move it over to Leah. Leah, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and would like to thank all the witnesses for being here today. I wanted to start off with Madame McDougall. You spoke about the need for a whole of government approach, the importance of having an intersectional approach, and this is certainly something that I have been pretty vocal about. We don't have one-size-fit-all solutions, and we have to take in histories into consideration, histories as well. And I know in the introduction on the Color of Violence report that I know that you'll be releasing soon, it was identified that the lack of access to culturally safe spaces create barriers in accessing support, particularly for Black, Indigenous, newcomer, immigrant, refugee, and racialized survivors. I would agree with that, even in the city of Winnipeg. Could you expand on that, please?
Eloisa?
Thank you. And thank you. I, of course, so appreciate Treaty 1 and the land of the Métis people, the homelands of the Métis people, and have had the privilege of being in that territory doing this kind of organizing. And I think what we haven't seen and what you, I believe, named is that historically services have been based around the idea of the universal woman, which has prioritized women of privilege, particularly European women. If we understand that Canada is a settler colonial state and that through European colonization, there has been a stratification which has positioned European women at the top and Indigenous women at the bottom, and then other women sort of layered throughout that stratification. And this is really important for us to keep in mind when we're thinking about how we redress violence and gender-based violence in communities that have been historically and contemporarily subjugated within that colonial framework, which is alive. This is a living history. So the buy-in for option, which is to resource communities of color and Indigenous communities and Black communities in order to take action, is actually a really useful approach. We know that Indigenous
just because I want
to respond to violence.
Sorry, I want to ask you another question. I have a limited amount of time. I want to get it on record. But I know that you also spoke in the report about individuals working in criminalized or under-the-table economies, such as sex work, garment factories, also face significant barriers accessing justice when they experience gender-based violence. I ask this question because I know in the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls, they address this issue about around sex work. And, how sex workers are often placed in danger because of the criminalized treatment. Can you expand on that, please?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's such an important piece to highlight, is that, yes, we have advanced more sort of legal and criminalized options when we're talking about those that exchange sex for money and other things. And through the what we know is that whenever we seek to make kind of create legislation and criminal law around survival and those underground economies, that what happens is that communities of color, particularly Indigenous communities, and particularly Black communities, experience a different kind of response, and that there is an over-policing and an under-protecting of those individuals. And this is certainly the case for those that exchange sex for money, and whether that is in terms of enterprise or whether that's around exploitation. And so we think that it's very important that the decriminalization approach be considered, certainly for underground economies, and that there are services that are made available and options made available to help increase the safety of those who are within perhaps an exploitation framework, but then also for those who are in an enterprising kind of capacity in terms of the exchange of sex for money or other things.
Is for Madame Shakir. I know that you spoke about, I really appreciated your presentation, racism, language barriers in terms of accessing services. You also spoke about income. I've proposed a bill for a guaranteed livable basic income, Bill C-223, not requiring Canadian citizenship for refugee claimants, permanent residence. As a way in response to the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls, but also we know there's a direct correlation between violence and poverty, and having women actually have true choice. Would you agree with me that a guaranteed livable basic income would be a protection factor for women and diverse genders trying to flee violence?
You have 20 seconds to respond.
Absolutely. Only thing I would request you is to ensure that it's a realistic livable income and not something that, because rents in Toronto for a single bedroom are about $1,500, and I'm being conservative. So if you're talking about a livable income for a woman who's trying to support her 2 children, please ensure that it is realistic.
Perfect.
You just can't throw peanuts.
Yeah, perfect.
And expect us to grow bananas.
What we're going to... So that you can't just throw peanuts and expect bananas. I think that's what we all should put into our study. Thank you so very much for that last remark. A smile for such a difficult topic to discuss. We're now going to move it on to our second round, but due to the time limitations, I'm providing 3 minutes to both the CPC and the Liberal Party, NDP and Bloc. You'll be receiving 1 minute just because of time frame. So, Dominique, you're over for 3.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much to the witnesses for being with us today. My first question is for Ms. Sakar. So if I understood correctly, for South Asian women, when they experience violence, they consider it to be their destiny, correct?
When South Asian women experience violence, we think of it as our destiny. It's kind of
Oui, est-ce que Madame Sekar m'entend?
Ms. Sikar, can you hear me?
Yes. Merci. Est-ce que vous avez...
Perfect. Did you hear the question?
Not really, because I'm not getting the translation. I'm going back.
Elle n'a pas la traduction.
Okay.
Écoutez, le temps que peut-être ça se...
We'll try to solve the issue. Or can you hear interpretation now, Ms. Sikar? You can hear me? Perfect. Earlier, you stated that South Asian women, when they are victims of violence, they often consider that it's their destiny. Is that correct?
It's the way in which South Asian women have been socialized. That, this is part of their journey. That they've been, even the man is selected for them, or whoever it is selected for them, and that they have to complete that particular role as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter-in-law, as a sister-in-law. A South Asian woman essentially is married to the family. And I'm using the word marriage only because it's such a tradition-bound community.
Donc, on peut comprendre...
So, culturally then, it's a transmission of values that doesn't end if girls in that situation have that as an example. Miss Khan, now, I have another question for you. You mentioned that transgender people are 7 times more likely to be victims of violence, correct?
La difficulté après-midi.
I think we're having issues.
1.7 times more likely. And that's from the TransPulse survey that came out just recently. I would really advise you to read that. It's an excellent survey that looks at the experiences of trans people in Canada.
Une des questions que je me pose...
One of the questions that I had, so the violence that you're talking about, this violence is something that is inside of intimate partner settings?
Yes.
Oui. Alors, à ce moment-là, de quelle façon...
So, how is it lived? Is it as we might see habitually with IPV? Is it the same pattern for transgender people? Does it look the same? Is the violence felt the same way?
Well, I think in some ways it is the same because trans women are women, trans men are men. So there are things that happen within those relationships. But I think there's some things that are different when we live in a culture that is still extremely transphobic, where we have laws and policies that tell them that they're not allowed to use services or access supports or seen as people.
Perfect. I do. No, I do have to move you on. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get everything rolling, and our time is just crushing right now. That's all.
I understand that, but I'm going to finish my sentence. So then,
no, that's okay. Thank you.
When experience violence, they experience high rates of violence, and when they experience that, it's really important to understand that transphobia makes it difficult for them to actually be safe. And if we don't address transphobia and hatred for trans people, we won't end up.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm just going to remind everybody, we are so tight on time, so please let's be respectful of everybody's time. I really do appreciate that. I'm going to now move it over, and Anita, you have 3 minutes only.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is for Ms. Khan. You mentioned some really alarming statistics about young women aged 15 to 24, experiencing intimate partner violence or at least being in proximity to it. And I wonder, you very briefly touched on the digital sphere and the role that social media and online violence might have in propagating that. I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, the digital sphere is huge. So what we see right now is trading of nudes. We see people, putting out intimate images without consent. We see students harassed in lots of ways. We see young people solicited online and be catfished. We see also the ways in which families also survey and monitor and stalk their siblings, their family members using phones. So online harassment is huge. And also we have to recognize it happens within domestic violence relationships and also within the family. And that is a huge issue. I'm, it's devastating what we're seeing online.
My other question is for Ms. McDougall, but if you have time, I'd like the others to answer that, which is, you spoke about systemic inequities. We often think about Okay, we often think about GBV and intimate partner violence in terms of the BIPOC, newcomer, racialized communities experiencing it in larger numbers. But you said something about that there's also racism through the service provision and policies. So when they actually go out to seek that help, there's also racism in the experiences of BIPOC women. I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
And we have 90 seconds in total.
Okay.
Overarching, it is the result of endemic and systemic racism, attitudinal and behavioral, that then is acted out both in what a survivor experiences when they attempt to access services, but it's also the way in which services are created and delivered. This is not to disparage all of our incredible workers all across these lands that are under-resourced and under-supported. It is a recognition that we are talking about historic inequities that exist. And so what we want to do is redress that. We want to disrupt that. We want to shift that by centering an anti-racist approach, which is to really understand this, these behavioral and attitudinal challenges. But it's also with respect to how we think about violence in general, which means that we have to think about policing. We have to think about child protection, child welfare. We have to look at the health system, which are all, of course, infused with the same inequities and racist attitudes and practices. So it's an ongoing piece of work that I think is laid out in some ways through the national the National Action Plan on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women in terms of those pieces, but it's also described and laid out in very well through the roadmap to a national action plan, which I understand the committee has.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're now going to be moving it over for we have 1 minute with Adrienne. 1 minute, please.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I can't remember if it's Ms. McDougall or Ms. Can that talked about coercive control, or maybe it was both of you. What is the significance of including coercive control in changes to our legislation?
It's so important because right now there's such a limited view of what happens in domestic violence. So things like controlling your whereabouts, where you go, and how actually violence manifests. Oftentimes it isn't physical or sexual. And so allowing us to have a wider view of that, to include coercive control, make sure that survivors know that what's happening in their households and their families and their intimate relationships is wrong, and allows us to do better education, allows people to have more methods of providing them support. And we need that right now.
If I could jump in just quickly, that coercive control is a kind of a rebranding of power and control, which is an idea that we've been working with since the 90s. And so that's an important consideration, that often we think about, physical and sexual violence, but we're not thinking about all of the other tactics of power and control that are existing in an abusive relationship. And I think the legislation piece is an important consideration.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, I am going to have to cut people off because we have people in the waiting room trying to get in since 4:30. So I'm going to pass it over now, Leah, for our final minute. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My last question is for Madame Khan. Women with disabilities are twice as likely to be sexually assaulted. We've had, there's almost zero attention to this reality. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, and I would add children of all genders that have disabilities also. I have a son with a disability, and it's something that I worry about every day. I think it's something that we need to address in terms of how our service provision is done, how we access services, what services we're looking at, and also expanding who we see as people that commit gender-based violence. So in looking at people that are caregivers, people that are brought in as nurses, people that support children with disabilities, people with disabilities, and specifically women with disabilities. I think, again, if we're not centering the most marginalized in the approaches that we do with the NAP, then we leave people behind. So we need to center actually people with disabilities, specifically women, trans, and gender non-binary folks, so that they can get the support that they need. We cannot leave them behind. We have to center them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Status of Women Committee, I would really like to thank the Battered Women's Support Services, Possibility Seeds, and South Asian Women's Center. We're going to take about 30 seconds while we switch panels. And once again, thank you to you all. If you do have documents or briefs and additional information that you would like to send, please feel free to send it to the clerk. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day. 30 seconds. when the other witness comes back, she'll be able to join us. So thank you once again for everybody joining us. We are in our final panel for today. On our second panel, we have the Alliance des Maisons Remonte de 12e étape pour femmes et enfants victimes de violences conjugales, Sabrina Lametier and Maud Patel. From the Awotan Healing Lodge Society, we have Josie Nipinak. And from the BC Lions Club and Ending Violence Association of British Columbia, joining together, we have Jamie Taras and Ninu Kang. So I'd like to thank you all for coming here. We're going to start by giving you each 5 minutes for your opening statements for each of the organizations. So I'm going to pass the floor over to the Alliance first. You have 5 minutes. At the 4-minute mark, I will start letting you know you're at your 1 minute. So I'm going to pass the floor over now to the Alliance. 5 minutes.
Bonjour, merci aux membres.
Hello, and thank you to the Standing Committee on the Status of Women for giving us the opportunity to talk about intimate partner and domestic violence in Canada. The Alliance des Maisons d'Hébergement includes 34 shelters, and today we will be sharing possibilities for services for victims, and we will talk about coercive control as well and government support. Before moving on to the technical aspects of our recommendations, we would like to take a few minutes to highlight certain issues. When we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about lives that are really impacted. 5 years ago, in 2015, a woman named Daphne lost her life because of her partner. She had ended a toxic relationship with her partner. She is not supported and not well advised by the police services. Daphne was murdered by her ex-partner. This highlights what can happen when victims are not properly supported. The protocol that was in place was not followed, and unfortunately her life was lost. People are now fighting for justice for victims and better support. We are able to share some words for the daughter of Daphne. For 5 years, you have been left alone. And unfortunately, trivializing domestic violence needs to end. The fight is only starting, and I hope that you will support me as you always have.
Appreciate doing that. We're now moving over to the BC Lions Club and the Ending Violence Association of British Columbia. Jamie and Ninu, I'm going to let you decide who goes first. I'm passing the floor to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the Standing Committee on Status of Women for inviting Jamie Terrace of the BC Lions Football Club and me to present on the importance of engaging boys and men in our national gender-based violence strategy. I'm Ninu Kang, the Executive Director of Ending Violence Association of BC, and I'm calling from the unceded, ancestral, and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. EVA BC is a provincial association working together with nearly 300 member programs to provide frontline support services across BC to end gender-based violence, harassment, and hate. Additionally, we provide cross-sectoral supports by bringing community together and deliver prevention programs by engaging boys and men through our internationally recognized and award-winning program called Be More Than a Bystander, Break the Silence on Gender-Based Violence, a partnership with the BC Lions Football Club that Jamie will also speak to in a minute. Why is engaging boys and men through the Be More Than a Bystander program so important? Well, we know that from the previous panelists that you had on, intimate partner violence represents 26% of all violent crimes coming to the attention of law enforcement. We also know that sexual assault is the most underreported of all crimes. Less than 5%. 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted in their lifetime, and 66% of female sexual assault victims, survivors, are under the age 24. So you can see raising awareness on gender-based violence and providing simple tools to boys and men to intervene and respond to various forms of gender-based violence is critical, empowering boys and men to be part of the solution instead of being part of the problem. Gender-based violence has been seen as a women's issue, and we raise our hands to all women who came before us, who fought the fight and influenced policy systems and structures we have today. However, there is a critical resource we left untapped. That is men who are ready and willing to stand up next to women to end gender-based violence. In 2011, Eva BC approached the BC Lions to partner with us, to join us on the work to end gender-based violence. We worked with a male educator named Jackson Katz, who argues that while women have been in the forefront of this work, it is not a woman's issue. In fact, he argues that this is a men's issue. The approach really resonated with us. And together with the BC Lions Football Club, we developed the Be More Than a Bystander program. The program utilizes professional sports icons, BC Lion football players, to go into high schools and with anti-violence workers to speak to thousands of boys and girls to raise awareness to end gender-based violence. The program also implemented a provincial-wide promotion and awareness strategy utilizing TV, radio, social media, game day ads, and other promotions that promoted the Be More Than a Bystander message to the Lions fans and the followers throughout our province. And I'm going to send it over to Jamie to talk more about the BC Lions experience.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ninu. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. Before I start, I want to recognize the true heroes on this call, all of the women who have dedicated their lives to making our society safer when it comes to gender-based violence. Thank you sincerely for your efforts. For those of you who don't know, the BC Lions Football Club is a professional football team that competes in the CFL. The only reason we entered this arena is because we were asked to help. Gender-based violence is a complex, challenging, and difficult reality, and well, we play football. I remember that when we first discussed getting involved with our leadership team, and I expressed concerns about how our organization's reputation might be at risk with skeletons coming out of the closet or current players or coaches having an incident and the press jumping all over us, slinging the BC Lions' good name through the mud. However, it was our head coach, the legendary Wally Wano at the time, who stood up and stated emphatically, we should do this because it's the right thing to do. Our community has a problem. They've asked for our help, so let's do our best to give it. It turns out Wally had experienced domestic violence in his own home growing up and had to intervene on behalf of his mother. He went on to state that if we have challenges within our organization, we will deal with them. We won't hide from them. We will do what's right. And so we took a giant leap forward alongside our partners, Eva BC, and launched the Be More Than a Bystander program. Over the past 11 years, we have visited many locations throughout our beautiful province, teaching high school students about gender-based violence, sharing with them the tools on how they can safely intervene, and ultimately encouraging them to be more than a bystander and break the silence on gender-based violence. It's safe to say the program has been a success. The silence has been broken, and the dialogue about this topic has been embraced by the students we have visited. From an organizational perspective, we are amongst the first professional sports leagues to adopt a gender-based violence policy. Is my time up there?
It sure is. It sure is. But thank you so much. I should have given you a timeout, maybe 5 yards back, something important here, you know. Anyway, thank you so much. We're now going to move it over to, we're going to come back and we're going to speak to Awatan Healing Lodge Society with Josie. Josie, you've got the floor for 5 minutes.
Yes, good afternoon. Josie Nipanak. And I am with Executive Director for the Awatan Healing Lodge, and I come to you this afternoon from beautiful Mohkinstsis in the Treaty 7 territory, also known as Calgary, Alberta.
And
the question to 5:45.
Okay. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Awadan Healing Lodge. We provide services and have been for 32 years to Indigenous women and their families, and secondly to immigrant women and settled Canadians. So we've been doing this business for more than 30 years. However, our framework is quite unique and different, I would say, from mainstream emergency women's shelters, where we center the elders' knowledge and wisdom within our practice framework, and that is around the traditional teachings of the diverse Indigenous people that live in Calgary, as well as access to the medicines that are part of who we are as spirit. And also we take in multi-generational families into the emergency shelter. We have grandmothers with their grandchildren, we have grandmothers, daughters, grandchildren, aunties, so we bring in the whole family, whereas other mainstream shelters don't have that practice. However, it is indicative of the family unit within our Indigenous communities. A program that we have is that we're currently working on. It's called Reconciliation and Healing from Trauma and Violence, an Indigenous healing and wellness framework as a promising practice for Indigenous survivors and their families. And this program is now in its third year, based on an evaluation of the women who come into the emergency shelter, and we through survey, through storytelling, through various activities, talk to them about what is it that they need in terms of support and services. And one of the biggest things that they see is that sense of community, the building of community. And it is when they come into a service area, they would like to see people who look like them. They want to see the dark hair, the brown eyes. They want people with a common experience, because they're often feeling that they have been judged over and over and multiple times because of who they are, and are feeling not welcome, or feeling that perhaps this is not the right place for me. Am I going to get what I need here, etc. So what we do with that is we employ an Indigenous framework and storytelling lens to the research that we do. And we do hope that this work that we're currently conducting will become a blueprint model for other emergency shelters, specific, not necessarily specific, but to those who serve Indigenous women across the country. The other project that we are just launching at this moment is what we call a title is Reclaiming Power and Place, and it's co-developing distinctions-based principles of engagement with families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And we're doing this in Calgary with the Calgary Police Services, whom we've had conversations about. Let's come together, let's talk about when there is a missing and murdered loved one, how do we work with families in a way that families are feeling respected, they're feeling listened to, and that there is integrity in the investigation. Because quite often, and I will tell you, there are many families, at least 7 families in Calgary, that are still waiting for answers from the police regarding the violent death of their loved one. And so this project, I guess, is really about, over the next year, we will have engagement sessions with Calgary Police Services, Indigenous community, elders, survivors, allies, to talk about what this communication protocol might look like. And we understand that there are processes that the police services have in terms of their investigation, but how do we, as families of MMIW, wish to proceed with those conversations, and what is it that we need? Because quite often families, as you're well aware from the national inquiry, as well as the provincial recommendations we just did, is the communication and the relationship with the police is the most is the most stressful and seen as the most racist experience that Indigenous families have with the process. So we hope to develop a culturally safe engagement strategy protocols with families of MMIW. We hope to co-develop an engagement and evaluation tool with them. And at the end of the day, what we want is protocols to have that respectful interaction. The other thing that I want to say, because I know my time is running out real quick, is there's often nice words attached to the experiences of Indigenous women, gender-based violence. I don't know the in my language, which is Anishinaabe, and I don't know that there is such a word as gender in my language. So I often so now I think about family violence and where family violence comes from an Indigenous community. You've heard this. It comes from it comes from genocide. It comes from the paternalistic policies that exist around Indigenous women, Indigenous families. It comes from the destruction of families, and it comes from racism. And these together. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. We have gone way over time on yours, to be honest.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. You've got such important information. Okay. I just wanted to allow everybody, but we are getting into such critical time right now, and I'm sorry. We will be going only till 5:45. Then we do have committee business after that. So it's going to be 6-minute rounds to start, and then we'll decide at the 24-minute mark how we'll proceed from there. I'm going to pass the floor over to Dominique. Dominique, you have 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here this afternoon. I would like to start by asking some questions to the Alliance des Maisons d'Hébergement de Deuxième Étape. Thank you for your presentation. I'm eager to hear more about possible solutions. You talked about Ms. Goudreau's case, which is shocking and disturbing. Clearly, mistakes were made. What can be retained from this experience that you shared with us? Do we perhaps need to put more emphasis on police training? What more needs to be done when a woman is facing an impossible solution like Ms. Goudreau, where she needs to go get her belongings by herself? How can we do better in situations like that? Thank you for your question. I just wanted to add that I missed a bit of my presentation. Our presentation wanted to show improvements that could be made for the social safety net that needs to be given to women and their children. So for the question, there are different solutions, and I will ask my colleague to share some with you. In Quebec, just before the pandemic, a report was published called Rebuilding Trust. There are 190 recommendations in that report, and they are ambitious and would allow for the creation of that safety net. I will quote a few of them. For example, special tribunals and better support for victims. There's also the e-bracelet, so that when partners are out of prison and they continue to harass their victims, that we can avoid murders, homicides, and infanticides, because often children are also victims. There's also the mention of a continuum of services. Victims need to be supported through all the different steps. And to come back to your initial question, in the situation, in Daphne's situation, as she was 18 years old, in that case, it was the police training that was lacking, because they had a protocol for supporting victims of abuse, and they're supposed to accompany women, and in this case they didn't. The police arrived later, and in that time, the man was able to murder Daphne. So I will ask Maud to tell us a bit more, perhaps briefly, Miss Maud. Indeed, recently, the provincial government focused on a reform to the youth protection legislation, and we want domestic violence to be a part of it. This would have a significant impact on the understanding of domestic violence and domestic violence after separation, because a lot of people and a lot of responders will see a situation and will not understand the depth of the domestic violence. We talked about training for police officers, for responders. It would allow for a more global understanding that will be better so that responders can offer better support. In Quebec, there was a quick response team that was created so that people could respond quickly in dangerous situations, and they respond within 48 hours. Thank you. I apologize. I don't have a lot of time left. Now for football. The experience that you've shared, have you exported it in your network?
Monsieur Tara.
Mr. Tara.
Are you saying, have we taken it outside of the province of British Columbia?
Bah oui, si vous...
Sure. Or in other sports societies, have you offered this to other football teams? Have other sports teams followed your initiative?
Yes, we have had the opportunity to train other teams in the CFL to adopt a similar program. And we've worked with other sports organizations as well. Anyone that really wanted to get involved, including amateur sports. So we have tried to pass on the knowledge and the model and the methodology to other sports teams as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Jamie, you're the one I seem to be cutting off a lot today, so sorry about that. I'm now going to move it over to Jenna. Jenna, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses who have joined us today. Some really inspiring work that you're undertaking. I think first, actually, I will go back to Mr. Terrace. You know, what strikes me is the fact that this program, if I heard correctly, has been operating since 2011. So I'd like to give you just a brief moment to speak to the success or experience over those 11 years that is demonstrating the success of the program?
I would say success has been the appetite of the students. There's a real willingness on the part of the students in the schools to hear this information about domestic violence, intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, and then to get involved as part of the solution. So I believe that there is a lot of hope there, and that's why we wanted to get involved with that age group, because it's difficult sometimes to change the mental models and biases of older people. But for the young, we thought it would be a great place to start, and that was where we felt our voice could be best heard.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And perhaps now going to Ms. Kang. You know, I think we've heard a lot today about the impact of speaking and engaging with children at a young age about gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. So I'm wondering, in your experience, you know, what the reception is of starting those discussions young, and having those and educating youth, if I may, at a young age.
Yeah, thank you for that question. You asked Jamie earlier about the success of this program, and I think it's the model that we have developed. And this model is a true partnership with the BC Lions and a women serving organization, women-centered organization. And it's about working with men who are really committed to standing next to us as women. And so when I think about that program and the new players, we train them, new cohort, Jamie and I, we just finished a training with a new cohort of BC Lions, and they're now trained to go into the schools. And what we feel is that the young people are looking up to these sports icons. And we have an anti-violence worker there with them, that if any disclosures come up, that we have supports in place. We also, in the back end, really work closely with the school and the school counselors as well, to ensure that when we're in and out of there in that way, that there's capacity within those schools to continue to support the young people. And so when I think about engaging with young people, the other very significant part of this program is that we do not demonize boys and men. Often when we've looked at gender-based violence issue, it's kind of put men and boys on, women and men, girls and boys on the opposite sides of the spectrum. And sometimes, the fact that we've needed to address this very, very challenging issue, we've had to really, really center on survivors. And this is an opportunity where we prevent from us having to intervene when violence actually happens. So these are young boys who see men standing and talking about gender-based violence, and they're looking up to them, and they're creating vocabulary, they're creating simple tools of how to intervene without being something super comprehensive. And so we want this to become part of their wiring, is that they know that when they see something, they're going to step in and feel empowered to do something, because we leave them with very simple tools in this program.
Amazing. Thank you so much. The next question I'd like to direct to Ms. Napanak. In your testimony, you spoke about the importance of building community. And it really gave me a sense of how important the work you're doing in ensuring culturally appropriate supports. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to us a bit about the factors that are influencing the healing journey of the women that you're serving.
You'll just have to take yourself off mute.
Yes, thank you. We have to remember that the demographics of Indigenous women coming into large urban centers has changed particularly over the past decade. And so Indigenous women are coming from across the country to live in urban centers like Calgary, and often find themselves quite isolated. And so there is a need to connect with a cultural community, a need to connect to people who look like you, a need to connect with people who speak the same language, the ceremony, the food that we share, and the family kinships that we have within our communities. And so there is a need for that connection and building your community and cultural events around those factors, and feeling like you belong. Belonging without judgment, belonging without racism, belonging with individuals who have a shared history, and accepting you as you are with that shared history. And that's and this is what Indigenous women are telling us, whether it's a group of women coming together to sing drum songs, whether it's a group of women coming together to do some beadwork, whether it's a collective kitchen and we decide we're going to make bannock tacos for supper. That is building that community. It's about that connection to and the humor is something else. Like you got to and laughing with your friends is important. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're now going to pass the floor over to Adrienne. 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much to our witnesses. Thank you for your presentations that are sharing important information on the issues at hand. My first question is for the Alliance des maisons d'hébergement de deuxième état pour femmes et enfants victimes de violences conjugales. For Ms. Lemeltier, you talked about, in a brief, the e-bracelet that is an important tool in the fight against domestic violence. This was shared at the National Assembly of Quebec in a bill study, and it states that there should be a specific analysis when a family has domestic violence, especially when the father is in a situation of coercive control with the mother and the children. We're talking about dominance inside of intimate partner violence, where the aggressor will have complete control on its victim, completely annihilating their freedom to act. Could you talk a bit more about this statement, please? Thank you for your question. It's very important, and we wanted to talk about coercive control. I'll give you an example. This weekend, a woman who is at one of our shelters went to a garage to get her car fixed, and the worker realized that there was a tracking device on her car. Her partner had put that on her car. Imagine the panic that could have caused. And that caused panic because she was also staying in a shelter, and the location of that shelter is supposed to be secret. There are so many forms of violence that are hard to identify, and there needs to be better training. The woman did not have a black eye, but she is a victim of domestic violence. And shelters, or women will often end up in shelters a few months after the violence happens, and it will take on a different form after that. It can be harassment. It can be financial control. It can be holding on to the woman's immigration documents. It can be refusing supervised access with children. So that control gets worse, and the time after separation is the most dangerous for women. Indeed. And when we're talking about sexual violence and control, we know that it's important to legislate on coercive control in order to get to the heart of the issue and to work on the issue upstream. We also saw here at this committee the criminalization of coercive control. That's not the end-all solution. We also need to work on prevention, of course. What do you think about this? Are there other solutions that need to be examined for prevention? Could this e-bracelet help people feel more safe? Response. When we're talking about coercive control, there needs to be continuous training for law enforcement and people in the justice system. With coercive control, it is an integral part of violence. We're talking about dominance and coercion. We focus on the fact that coercive control should be recognized in the criminal code, because that will lead to better awareness and training for responders and for people who will be working with victims. We also know that for shelters that support women and for those second stage shelters, workers need to be able to identify coercive control. But if it's not well understood by the system as a whole, victims will not be receiving exhaustive support. So coercive control and understanding it will be a tool and can be added to the arsenal of measures in place in order to offer a safety net for women and children who are victims of domestic violence. And when we're talking about the e-bracelet, that could be part of the arsenal of measures that we would like to see implemented in order to protect victims. Thank you very much. So if I heard correctly, we should follow in Quebec's steps.
For 6 more minutes to Leah Gazan. Leah?
Thank you so much, Chair. The first questions I wanted to ask are towards Madame Nepinak. I know your son, Chief Nepinak, very well. And it's a pleasure to have you here. And I know he always speaks so highly of you and your work around that you've done for so long around violence, ending violence against Indigenous women and girls. I wanted to focus specifically on police. You spoke about a distrust between police and Indigenous people, and I think it's for good reason. I'm going to give a couple of examples, and I want you to maybe answer how you think we need to mend the relationship. I know that the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls certainly provided calls for justice. Aisha Hudson in Winnipeg shot dead by police. There's currently an inquest. We have Wet'suwet'en Territory. We saw 2 RCMP officers with a guard dog, a chainsaw, and an axe take down a door with 2 unarmed Indigenous women. Manitoba, one of the most horrific, disgusting acts of police abuse of power was actually, in fact, in northern Manitoba with a former officer, RCMP officer, Theriault, who actually took, it says Theriault and another constable had arrested the woman at a party and placed her in a cell until she sobered up. 6 hours after she was brought in, Theriault returned to the dispatchment out of uniform and asked her to be released into his care. To which he was allowed to do by the supervising officer, who said, and I don't know if I have the quote right, but it's hard to forget, you arrested her, you can do whatever the F you want to do with her, something to that effect. So, I mean, there's real reasons why there's mistrust. It's not hysteria. It goes beyond stereotypes. This relationship is severely, severely tainted. What kind of steps need to be taken to improve the relationship, to ensure that should Indigenous women and girls and diverse gender have involvement in police, that the relationship is not even just amended, to ensure that they're actually safe?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question. And it is a severely fractured relationship that we currently have with the police, and the atrocities that are happening within police services across the country to Indigenous women is, in my opinion, an epidemic and requires immediate attention by the policy and the legislators to stop that action immediately. I think Indigenous women have been made disposable by police services themselves in this country. The very fact that they have it in their power to take the lives of Indigenous women and Indigenous young girls as well, because we have heard of police officers raping young and impregnating young Indigenous women. And we've heard stories at the National Inquiry where Indigenous women are stopped on the highway and raped by police officers. So this system needs to be, in my opinion, dismantled, and it needs to be rebuilt from the bottom up, where we build safe spaces for Indigenous women. Now, there is a model, and I believe it's in South America, where there are police stations of police women only. And these police stations don't look like a police office. They look like a daycare center. You walk in and it is occupied by police officers of women who are dressed in street clothing, but there is a play area for the children as well to be looked after and nurtured. But yet all the while she's in a safe place to tell her story about what happened with this incidence of violence. We need to change the way we're thinking about policing and Indigenous peoples in this country. We need to have the genocide. The genocide must stop. The colonial violence perpetuated by police in this country is, I mean, you cannot imagine unless you have experienced. Most folks who have privilege cannot fathom that this actually happens in the communities. As a child, I had to run away from police officers because they were going to take us, and they became known as those who take us away. That is certainly the case still to this very day, almost 60 years later, when I first went into the residential school. So we must do this in a better way. And as I say, let's dismantle and let's build from the ground up.
So just, do I have 1 minute? So in Winnipeg, as you know, I'm going to break. So we have Bear Clan Patrol, we have Mama Bear Clan Patrol, which are really community volunteer street patrols that, monitor the community, get to know the community, and make sure that we look after each other as a community. Do you think those kind of community patrol safety, community-led, community-driven safety patrols are a good alternative to ensure that Indigenous women and girls are safe?
Yes, and absolutely. We do have, in Calgary, we do have the Bear Clan. We have another group that call themselves Crazy Indians. And when there is an emergency in the community, like we had a few weeks ago, where there was a death of a young boy, these folks came out to be the fire keepers, because as we know, we have to have the 4-day fire when there is a death. And so they volunteered their time, they volunteered resources. Now, most of these groups are doing this work without any resources at all and volunteering their time. And many of them work during the day and then give their time at night to ensure people are safe. So we need to look at community-based solutions, and we need to go back to Indigenous as the experts of our communities to develop those solutions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We're now going to take in toward the second round. We're getting very, very tight on time. It's going to be 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over quickly. Shelby and Eric, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question, and then I'll leave the rest of the time for my colleague Shelby. To our friends from BC, whoever would like to answer the question, I'm curious on the More Than a Bystander program, if there are any measurable benchmarks or ways of monitoring the success and areas of improvement in the program. I'm curious if you can talk about that, and if you do have those measures that you're tracking, I would ask if you are actually able to submit them to the committee after the meeting.
Jamie, do you want me to speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Ninu.
Yeah, so we do ongoing evaluations and feedback from the programs that we deliver. And so in our partnership with the BC Lions, again, there's ongoing communication that happens between us. So there's a bit of a continuous improvement methodology that we're using. We don't have a formal evaluation of this program that we could provide to the committee, but we can certainly provide data with regards to what we've compiled over the last 11 years. So Jamie and I are happy to put our head together and get something over to you on that. But one thing that I want to say is that the methodology that we use is actually a very simple methodology. It's a very simple message that we deliver to young boys and girls in the school. And one of the key components of it is to unveil masculinity. And it's to talk to young boys about messages that they're receiving about being a boy, and what it means right from birth onwards and when they're in school, and the positioning and the posturing that boys do as a result of all the messages we hear, including now that we've talked a lot about digital media messages. And then the second component of this program is to actually give them some practical tools So we've used videos to demonstrate that what would you do in this scenario? And we pose questions to young people to say that in this particular incident, how would you be more than a bystander? What are some of the verbal things that you could say, non-verbal things you could say or do to just intervene and interrupt the violence? So again, I just want to stress that it is such a simple and yet powerful methodology and approach that we're using, which is why it's won awards internationally and been recognized locally. And like Jamie said, we've taken it national to the CFL, and we're working with other, corporates and unions, and we're taking these programs in there. So that's the power of this program.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're now going to go for the next three. Emanuela.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank all of our witnesses, but specifically Ms. Kang and Mr. Taras, my questions are going to go to you. Every single meeting we hear about how crappy this world is just by hearing a lot of the testimony that we hear on this committee in this particular study. And so I'm a huge fan of the work that you guys are doing. I'm a former high school teacher myself. I've worked most of my working life. I've been working with children, and the reason for that is because I see them as beacons of hope who can still be shaped and influenced in the right way. So big thank you and congratulations to what you guys have been doing. I think that a big part of the reason why it's been working is because you're sending in successful football players to talk to these kids, and so they see them as role models. And we know that role models play a huge role in how people see themselves as they grow up. But you did mention that men and boys are supposed to be part of the solution, and I'm really happy that we've figured out a way to get boys involved. Do you have any suggestions for how we can get men who are not necessarily at that early stage of learning to buy in to the idea that they need to be not just bystanders, but need to be part of the solution?
Jamie, maybe you can speak to
the great question. It's one of the things we do during every presentation, including school presentations and presentations within the communities. We challenge men and boys to get involved as advocates, as allies with our sisters. In a sense that this isn't a women's issue, it's a men's issue, because it's men that are unfortunately committing most of these violent crimes. So that is a core part of all of the messages that we give the kids and the adults that we speak to. And we often, and that's why I'm involved. When I heard about 1 in 3 women that, are going to be sexually assaulted in this beautiful and wonderful country, that's disgusting. And that's what, drove me to get involved, to lend my voice alongside my sisters and to speak up against gender-based violence. And I think that's the power in men talking to other men. And that's what we try and do.
Thank you very much for those answers. I think it's also important to focus on the negative effects of toxic masculinity on men, the fact that they can't necessarily express their emotions in the same way and without being judged, and the fact that the suicide rate is actually higher among men. So there is definitely a big benefit to us talking about gender in this open way and talking about these different stereotypes. So thank you again for the work that you're doing, and thanks again to all the witnesses. I won't take up too much time.
Thank you so much. We're now going to pass it over to Adrienne for 1 minute.
Merci beaucoup. Alors d'abord,
Thank you very much. Thank you to Ms. Lemeltier and Ms. Pontel. So about 43% of women who were victims of IPV felt controlled or trapped by their partners, according to Statistics Canada. And we know that coercive control can lead to violence. For the data that you've just shared, these numbers are very important and should be reflected in the services that we offer women. In Quebec, currently, we don't have enough resources for all the requests that we receive. Montreal, for example, has to refuse 75% of requests for stays at a second step shelter. We ask women to seek help, but when they ask for help, there's no space for them. So it's important when we start reflecting on policies to examine the continuum of services from the beginning to the return to society. And we also should talk about social housing. Presently, there aren't enough second-step shelters, so they can't receive everyone, and they cannot be housed decently and in a way that responds to their needs.
I have a minute left, and we're going to pass it over to Leah Gazan for the last minute.
Thank you so much. Madame Nipanak, you spoke about programs where you take in intergenerational families. Can you explain why that's particularly important for Indigenous peoples?
Well, quite often, as we know in Indigenous communities, there is multiple families living together, and that is often the preferred way, which is how I grew up as well with my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and then myself, because my mother had to go out to work cleaning houses, etc. So having that sense of belonging and that sense of community and that nurturing, and to carry on some of the traditional teachings, such as the language, because that's a huge piece. But there's also the other pieces around some of the ceremonial work that needed to be done around the household and community, and that was by looking after family and having, we truly had that extended family, because we had other family members that were in a community that we quite often brought into the house to be part of the household. But we had crisis intervention as well in the homes when someone was in trouble. So we had all those traditional methods, and I believe that we need to revisit and some of that wisdom and go back to some of that practice. It is extremely important for grandchildren to have their grandmothers present with them, as well as their aunties. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you so much. I think we saw there with Miss Puntel's little daughter coming over why we need to do such important work like this. So on behalf of the committee, I would really like to thank Sabrina, Maud, Josie, Jamie, and Nunu for being part of this great discussion today. If you want to log off, or if you could log off, that'd be fantastic, and I really do appreciate you coming and providing your testimony. In a second, once everybody's logged off, we will be going through minutes, just seconds really, because we'll get it done, of just some committee business. And seeing all the great faces on here, so fantastic. I have advised some of the vice chairs on this, but we want to talk about destroying confidential documents. See, this is something that I had brought up to other people, and I'm looking to see if somebody is willing to move a motion on destroying these documents. Leah, would you like... Go ahead.
Long day.
Not a problem. So do we need this a formal, or can we just do it? Leah's doing it, or do it on Leah, can you be on record asking for these documents to be destroyed, please? I think you'll have to say it.
I move the records to be destroyed. Sorry.
Confidentially.
Can I have a nap now? Just kidding.
You're good. So, sorry, I did read all of this. So we are receiving so many, and I'm sure all of you have had the opportunity to go through them. But considering the sensitive nature of the study on intimate partner violence in Canada, I'm seeking for the agreement which we've just passed, and so I really appreciate that. We do, though, have one other situation here. There is a person who is going to be one of the witnesses, and they would have requested from the clerk to take additional measures due to their security. As the survivors request that additional measures be taken to ensure the confidentiality, the clerk will retain a paper copy of her brief in the office. Should members want to consult her brief, they may get in touch with the clerk. Do I have the committee's agreement on this, that if you wish to see it, I see nobody not in favor, everybody's in favor of this? Fantastic. So there will be documentation available through the clerk, and Lexi will let you know what we need to do there. Just as we continue on Friday, we're going to have another busy day and some great groups coming. Carrie Lewis from the Interval House of Ottawa, Luke's Place Support and Resource Centre for Women and Children, that will be Pamela Cross. The Moose Hide Campaign will be here, Partage au Masculin, and the Wood Green Community Service. So we have another busy day on Friday. So thank you very much. Do I see adjournment for the day? Fantastic. Adjourned.